Hey everyone, welcome to the Acrobatic Arts podcast. I'm Loren, and I will be interviewing some of the top leaders and innovators from the dance and acrobatic industry. If you are a teacher, performer, student, or a lifelong learner like myself, you are sure to find these episodes intriguing and full of inspiration. Acrobatic Arts is passionate about providing current and relevant information for everyone. So please, sit back and enjoy as we share our passion with you and the world. We have a very special guest joining us live for the first time, Leah Holliday. Leah is an acrobatic arts master teacher, and she's here to break down the helicopter cartwheel. She'll be sharing key technical details, common mistakes to watch for, and her top training tips to build confidence for this dynamic skill. Leah Holliday, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Leah, you've given some amazing presentations on the podcast before, but this is your first time live, so it's a pretty special moment. I think I've known you for probably your whole life, and I just want to say that it has been incredible to watch you grow into such an amazing teacher and mentor. I'm so excited for everyone to learn from you today.
Aw, thank you so much. And I'm pretty sure you've known me my whole life. That is very true. I'm really excited to be here. I'm honored that I get to do this live. And I'll be honest, like a little bit nervous because I've never done anything like podcasty before. I mean, I've done the Acro minis, which were live, but never podcasty. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're going to be amazing. So take a deep breath. And how about before we start talking about the Heli, which is the topic today, you share a little bit about your journey in acro and dance and how you became involved with acrobatic arts.
Okay, thanks. I grew up dancing. I had two older sisters, grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan at the Barton School of Dancing and Baton Twirling. And I trained in all genres of dance. So ballet, tap, jazz, lyrical, and acro. We were lucky enough to have an instructor who was very knowledgeable in acro before like acro was a thing. That learning experience kind of fostered the love for acro. It started when I was 4 and I went right through until I graduated from high school. I was teaching from age 15 onward and then looped in once after having my family. Mandy Yip, the founder of Acrobatic Arts, also grew up with us in Regina, Saskatchewan and danced and baton twirled with us. And so I was lucky enough to have Mandy as a very good friend after I was done having my family. She was in the process of making this program, and what a program it is. Why wouldn't anybody jump on? I got all my certifications and started working with the Acrobatic Arts team and have grown and evolved from there. I bring, a lot of experience to the table, but I've learned so much from the staff at Acrobatic Arts as well.
Fantastic. And we are so lucky to have you today, especially because we're diving into the topic of the Heli. Some people call it the helicopter cartwheel or the Heli walkover, whatever you call it. I think you're one of our experts on it. You've done a lot of tutorials on it, a lot of progressions on it. So what do you think makes this skill such a hot topic?
I think this skill is really cool. It's super visually effective. The cycling of the leg as it comes around gives the effectiveness of a helicopter. And then further, I think it's become even more of a hot topic now because people are building upon the Heli cartwheel or the Heli or the original Heli and then taking it on and making it into harder, more effective, more visually pleasing skills, doing it on the forearms, the Heli on the forearms, back handspring to Heli. So I think just the effectiveness of that helicopter look is super cool to watch. And, it's achievable and people can learn it easily, or well, not easily. I mean, if you have the right foundations. And so I think once they get that and they build upon it, so many cool things can happen. So I think that's why it's become really, really popular.
And for anyone who doesn't already know, could you explain exactly what a Heli is, or even the Heli that we're talking about today?
Okay, yeah, the Heli cartwheel, the one we're talking about today, is basically a combination of a cartwheel and it transitions into a front walkover. But after the leg in the cartwheel cycles around into as you transition. So it goes from a cartwheel, the leg cycles around like a helicopter, and it comes up and over, and it transitions into a front walkover. So it's those two skills combined, which makes it really cool.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you find dancers face when learning the Heli?
Honestly, the biggest challenge is the swoop of the leg, the leg that gives the helicopter effect. So dancers really struggle to come from the cartwheel and get that leg to go down around the clock, if you will, towards the ground in a vertical fashion, and getting it to transition up into that front walkover. A lot of dancers will just like cut off what I call the swooping leg, and then it doesn't have that same effective helicopter look. Like it doesn't go vertical, it goes across horizontal. And that seems to be the part that the brain body needs to really get used to in order to transition properly and effectively. And that's what dancers struggle with. They think the leg is swooping, but it's not in fact doing it. So it takes a little bit of work to build that skill set and wrap their brains around how to do that properly.
I love that we have a progression called the swoop. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. How about we build on this, and can you elaborate on what foundational skills are crucial progressions required for this skill?
Absolutely. So foundations are important and progressions are important, as we know, across the board, especially when you're working with us in acrobatic arts. We really believe that is the most and safe, effective way to get dancers to achieve skills. So for this Heli cartwheel, dancers really should have, first off, proficient cartwheels in all planes. So right leg, left leg, one hand near and far on both sides, as well as a front walkover right and left. They also need to have a really proficient handstand, because there is a period in that helicopter where they have to kind of balance on their hands as their leg swoops around before they transition to the front walkover from the cartwheel. So they need those solid foundations. And if they have all of those pieces aligned and they're doing them all proficiently, this Heli cartwheel will come together nicely for them.
And I'm going to throw this out there for teachers who are teaching it maybe for the first time. If a dancer didn't have a strong handstand or a walkover or a cartwheel, what sort of things would be happening with the dancer when they're trying to achieve this skill?
Right. So the reason why those are important, I'll talk about that a little bit, is just because they go into the cartwheel on one leg. So say they go into the cartwheel on the left leg and they have to transition into the front walkover, they're going to come out on the opposite side. So if they're not able to do a front walkover, let's say on their right leg, but their left cartwheel is the leg they like to start the Heli in, they won't be able to recover out of the front walkover part of the Heli. So like the back end of the Heli. Further to that, if they really prefer the front walkover in their left leg, and they can't do a right cartwheel, then everything's going to fall apart. They're not going to be able to transition or recover. And it makes it really complicated for them, especially because the Heli does use both sides of the body. It's a real brain effort. And if their body's not mastered those skills, the brain and the body are not going to connect whatsoever.
So those new dancers trying the skill, they might, if they don't have the progressions or the balance between two sides, which I think is really great to have that, they might be losing their balance or they won't be able to support themselves. Is that what you see in new dancers?
Yeah, they'll fall out of it. And sometimes that becomes a safety issue too, because again, that brain body connection isn't happening. And so as they transition from one cartwheel into the walkover, they don't have the balance, they don't have the stability, they'll fall out, they'll fall sideways, they'll slam into a front walkover unsafely. And it just becomes a serious safety hazard for them because they're not able to sustain their body alignment.
Okay, so we're going to make sure that they have the foundational skills that you mentioned and the progressions we're going to talk about. So we're going to go back to the fun swoop. And can you take us through what that is and why mastering the vertical swoop is so important?
Okay, you got it. So when the dancer starts the Heli starts in a cartwheel. So the first part is they start into the cartwheel. As their legs pass through split, the leg is going to swoop around, so go down towards the floor. So that first leg that comes over is going to continue the motion of going around the clock and come all the way back up to 12 o'clock. They transition into that front walkover. Okay, that helicopter or that swoop creates that helicopter propeller effect that gives the name Heli cartwheel. So that swoop has to be conducted on a vertical fashion or plane rather than a horizontal plane to create that effective movement. If the dancer can't achieve the swoop, the overall effectiveness of that helicopter is not, it's not going to look like a heli cartwheel, sorry. It's just going to look like you've gone into a cartwheel and then flipped over into a front walkover. It's not going to have that helicopter effect.
All right, so the swoop is important. Do you have any tips to help dancers and maybe their teachers to get their body awareness correct? For example, on the swoop, do you have any tricks or tips?
I do. So the swoop, like I said, it's a body awareness situation where the body and the mind need to connect and the body needs to cooperate with what the mind wants it to do. So the big thing is making sure that that swoop comes down vertical. So quite often what I'll do is I'll have dancers put something like a tissue, a string, a scarf, or something in between their two big toes if they're swooping leg so that they have something to watch for. So sometimes their brain just, you need to give them a visual cue. And so when they go into that cartwheel, they start the swoop, they'll see that, I'll say, watch for the tissue as it passes your face. You need to see it, and that creates that vertical alignment. So that's one thing. Another thing that I find with the swoop, which dancers tend to struggle with, is like lifting up through their core to get that leg to come around. So having them do some handstand press type drills where they're having to lift up into handstand, push out through the shoulders and draw up through their core to get those hips up can be really helpful in creating the body awareness to get that leg to swoop around past their face, because they do need to draw in through their core as the leg swoops past so it doesn't hit the ground. So those are some really good tips. Typically, if they can do sort of a draw, so if they're in a straddle position, standing up in a wide acro second, and they put their hands down on the ground into like a handstand position, push out through the shoulders and then draw up through the core to bring those legs, they start to hover off the ground. It's that same feeling. So if they can do that, push out through shoulders, draw up through the core, bring those legs up so they're balancing in a handstand-like position. Their legs might be low, but their feet are hovering off the ground. That will also help them to build that awareness.
I did watch your acro mini, and one of the progressions you did was a swoop to a sit. Can you explain that?
Yes, absolutely. So this one is just straight cartwheel. So there's no walkover happening here. So it's focusing on the first part of the heli, the cartwheel with this swoop. So the dancer will start in a tendu devant. They'll pass through their split position in the cartwheel. Then that first leg that's coming over, so if it's a left cartwheel, it'll be their right leg, is going to swoop through and pass through that 6 o'clock position. And they end in a side sit with their knee bent. Pretty hard to describe, but if you go to the AcroDance Resource Center, you'll be able to see it in live. But that swoop to sit is really important in getting that abs to draw up and getting that leg to the side. It helps them to learn that positioning of pulling up through the core, bringing that leg down past 6 o'clock, because eventually it's going to have to pass up to 12 o'clock.
Right. So that's a really good progression. And for maybe a dancer who's not ready for the second half of the heli, the walkover part, they could do that cartwheel swoop to sit as a skill on its own. So it works both ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great skill to build upon, and it can look really cool, in a performance piece too, and can be transitioned to other skills as well.
All right, so let's talk about the actual heli. What are the key things to focus on when combining the swoop and the walkover? So the second half of this skill.
Yes, absolutely. So as we just talked about with the cartwheel to sit, that's the first part, right? But now they're not going to sit. So now that leg is going to swoop. So they've been in their cartwheel position, their leg swoops down past 6 o'clock. Now, as that leg is swooping up to 12 o'clock, to the top of the clock, that hand needs to transition. So if they are doing a left cartwheel, they'll move their left hand into a handstand, a forward handstand position. So they're going to transition into a front walkover. So their hands need to be in that forward handstand position. So that's really important. So that leg swoops down, comes up to 12 o'clock. As the leg reaches 12 o'clock, the hand is moving into a handstand position. Now they'll pass through that front walkover and recover from there. So that's really important that that hand moves so that the dancer can hit that walkover position properly and with correct technique. Also, I guess I should say too, the flexibility of the dancer's splits is really important as well. Like that swoop will only be as good as your dancer's flexibility. So if the dancer doesn't have, a full split or close to a full split, that swooping leg is not going to come right down past their body at 6 o'clock. So really working on your dancer's split is really important because we want that vertical alignment as opposed to that horizontal alignment.
And I think we've been talking about that a lot on the podcast about equal strength and flexibility. And that's what creates a really solid acro skill and safe as well. You were mentioning the hand placement for this skill is critical for success. Can you even explain a little more in detail about the timing and technique of the hand movement?
Yes, absolutely. So again, like I kind of mentioned, that swooping leg coming down past 6 o'clock. And as the leg moves up to 12 o'clock, that's when we're moving our hand into that forward handstand position. Another drill you can incorporate into your programming, if the dancers just aren't getting the timing of that, is to just like take the walkover piece out completely, have the dancer transition from their cartwheel with the swooping leg, and then just bring their feet up into a handstand position when they move their hand. So the leg comes up to 12 o'clock, move, show a strong handstand, and then instead of walking out, just step out. That drill is actually really quite hard. And sometimes it's even harder than a heli itself, but I find it's a really important drill for timing and for the strength required to actually achieve this skill. We talked about handstands earlier and how important that is. So if your dancer can do the swoop, and again, as that leg comes up to 12 o'clock, they're moving that hand into place. They'll hold that nice handstand. It can also create a time for where if this heli gets really, really solid somewhere along the line, you could actually add in a handstand pirouette before the walkover out. And you could create different variations that way. So the strength as a foundation in that handstand is so, so important. And I'll just reiterate too, like the dancers sometimes get really confused about which hand they should be moving. So again, if they're starting in a tendu devant left, and that's the start of their heli cartwheel, then they're going to move that left hand so that their hands are like next to each other for the front walkover, as you would in a normal front walkover if you're just starting in tendu devant. And if they're doing a right cartwheel, that right hand moves in. If the hand is too soon or too late, the ending of the skill will be twisted. They might fall out. They might lose stability, or it'll come out on a diagonal as opposed to square, because it does transition from a totally tummy to front parallel cartwheel to sideways front walkover. So if that leg isn't swooping right and that hand isn't moving at the right time, the walkover or the back end portion of the heli cartwheel will be kind of skewed or off angle, and it won't look right. And potentially they could get hurt and twist their spine in the wrong way and torque the wrong direction.
Right. So I'm just going to maybe say this again for our listeners. So it starts as a cartwheel. We do the swoop, you go to a nice handstand, and then you walk over out. And the whole skill travels in the same direction. So it's not switching direction. And that's what makes it so tricky. And you explained it really well with the timing of the hand position. But they really do have to make sure that it keeps traveling in the same direction, even though the hips are changing and the skill. So that's what makes it hard, but that's what makes it so awesome as well.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Now, spotting is obviously essential for safety, especially when they're just learning. Can you walk us through how you would spot with proper technique?
Absolutely. So if people go back to, and hopefully people listening are Module 1 certified in acrobatic arts. If you're not, you should be, so go out and get it. But we do talk about this, the correct spotting techniques for two particular skills, the cartwheel and the front walkover in our module 1. And so those foundations are really important. So in the cartwheel, when we talk about spotting a cartwheel, we talk about our hands in a C shape, so that the thumb is on one side of the hips and the fingers on the other side. Thinking about the pelvis too, because remember, when we're spotting, we always want to keep our hands on the bony structures, not the soft tissue. Okay, so that's really important. And then it's very similar to how we would spot a cartwheel. So in a cartwheel, we use that C shape, and we kind of sing ourselves a little song like hip, hip, and that's us catching those hips in that cartwheel position when the dancer is upside down. And then hooray is when they stand. Now we're taking out the hooray part because that's not going to happen, but it is important to know how to spot that. So that hip, hip, hooray cartwheel. Now we need to be able to spot that properly. And then on the other end, we need to know how to spot a front walkover properly. So there's various ways we can spot the front walkover. For the Heli specifically, it's important to keep sustaining the dancer as they transition from the cartwheel to the front walkover. So when we catch the hip, hip, we have they're upside down in a handstand, in a split. We have their hips in our hand. Now, our hand on their first leg that comes over is going to help them swoop the leg. We need to maintain continuity of the dancer by keeping our other hand on their hip. So we help them swoop that leg. As they come up and over, we're transitioning into a walkover spot. So now we have one hand on the hips come over. We're actually going to catch the hips and the shoulders as their feet land on the floor in the bridge. So it's like a basket, and help them to recover up. So again, reviewing the spotting of that cartwheel, and then the front walkover with a basket spot so that your hands are at their shoulders, across their scapula, and your first hand is across their hips, at their hip level, their pelvis level, to help them recover up. So it's really important that we maintain continuity of the dancer. We're not only helping them with the technique of the swoop, but also help them recover. And that's why we're helping with that basket recovery position.
Amazing. Teachers, you're in good hands with Leah. She's telling you all the main things to do when you're spotting, and that's fantastic. Leah, do you have any final tips or advice for teachers who are looking to introduce this skill to their students?
Yeah. So again, like a lot of it is just reiterating things I've said already, but the proficiency of all the cartwheels, right, left, dual-sided. We want our dancers to be, ambidextrous on both sides for all the cartwheels, one hand, two hand, and front walkovers, as well as those handstands. And I can't reiterate enough how important it is to have the mastering of those foundations, because they'll really help those dancers master this skill in the future easier. And again, that balance that we talked about earlier of flexibility and strength. So making sure our dancers have good shoulder flexibility, really good hip flexors flexibility, so their hips can open up into those square hip positions. So those square splits, really, really important. And just making sure that we're always talking about technique. Having a dancer just throw themselves into this skill really is unsafe, because it is transitioning in two different planes of body movement from, the cartwheel to the walkover. If they're not doing it properly, there's a real good risk that they're going to torque or hurt their spine in some way. All of this information is on the AcroDance Resource Center. So you can see a great example of how to spot on the AcroDance Resource Center. Also the progressions we talk about. So if you're more of a visual learner and hearing me talk about it wasn't helpful for you to build a visual of this, go on there, have a look. The progressions are on there as well. The cartwheel to sit, the cartwheel to sit to side, the cartwheel to sit to forward, as well as the acro mini that we did. I believe it was last year or the year before, when we put this all together to present to teachers, is also on there as well. So again, just foundations, and technique, and not just allowing our dancers to throw themselves into it is really important.
Amazing. Yes, there are so many resources, and Leah has provided many of them. So we'll make sure that we put all of those links in the show notes. So check that out if you're interested in the helicopter cartwheel. Leah, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today. I really had an awesome time talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here, and just so honored to be part of your podcast.
That's a wrap on today's episode. A huge thank you to Leah Holliday for joining us live and sharing her incredible knowledge on the helicopter cartwheel. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow acro lovers. Just like a helicopter, great acro skills are all about balance, momentum, and knowing when to take flight. Until next time, keep soaring and reaching for new heights. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day.